Machine.
Hello, this is Claire Lim and welcome to Hot Pod Time Machine. This is the podcast where we explore a decision from our past which changed the trajectory of our future. And I'm very happy to welcome on this episode, we have Patricia Summersett. Hello, Patricia. How are you doing?
I am great. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Now, Patricia and I, if you didn't see Insomnia's video of a wee chat, Patricia and I met last year. It was last August, wasn't it? 2022.
Yeah,
that's mad. That's a long time ago already.
I know, it's flying.
It's absolutely crazy. What did you make of coming over to the UK? Was that your first UK Comic Con?
It wasn't actually. In fact, it was my second Birmingham Comic Con, but I hadn't been. I had been there previously with MCM in 2019, and it was a very different experience, very different kind of convention. Because obviously, the gaming convention had just a ton of gamers there, and so entire rooms of people just playing games and bringing their own consoles. I found that absolutely wild to witness.
Of course, for those who don't know, lovely Patricia plays Princess Zelda in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And of course, that's why we met at the gaming convention. And what's really nice about conventions is along the way, I've made lovely friends and acquaintances. And I've kept in touch with Patricia, not consistently because she would end up hating me, but on and off. I'll say hello and stuff. So I'm really happy that you're on this episode, Patricia. I'm really, really glad you said yes. When I told you about the format and the subject matter, what was running through your mind?
It's interesting. It's a question that I don't get very often and can just lead to so many interesting answers. It's a great sequitur into many different things. So I love the format. I love this idea of kind of sliding doors-esque podcasting. It's great.
When you think of that, I've said this to many guests, and the decisions that we make over our lives. I mean, you could decide to have, toast for breakfast instead of something else, and that might change your whole day. Do you believe that if you change one tiny thing, that it can change your whole future?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, in a way, the format of this podcast is so, it could be so broad, and my impulse is to say, what about this really big change, which is probably what I'd talk about. But I think, again, walking out your door and deciding to turn right instead of left can make just as big a difference. Run into somebody, you could eat avocado, feel better that day, and do a better audition or get a different job because of it. Just random things like that. Yeah, of course, endless.
It would drive me nuts if I really had to sit down and think about it. It would drive me absolutely crazy. But let's talk about your decision. So I know it's probably hard to think about all the decisions that you might have made in your life that have led you to this point, but what do you want to talk about?
It was, I thought about that question. I was like, ooh, man, there could be so many great ways into just the fascinating version of becoming an artist and getting to where you are. One that stuck out in my head was this really specific time in my life where I was choosing to step back from acting, and I had really thought for sure, and I'd taken courses, I was going to become an artist educator. And it was after I'd done a classical acting degree in London. And it's a thing that most people don't know about me, I guess. I was very indie theater, indie music, indie art, and a little bit more on the subversive side, I'd say. And during that period of time, I sort of looked at the industry as a whole, and I was like, how can I make a difference? And I decided, I was like, I don't know if I can right now. I don't know if this is what I want to do. And so I started to actively seek out going to the Arctic. And part of this was kind of a larger metaphor for me for ice, because I've been an ice dancer my whole life. And there was something about returning to ice, returning to home, Upper Michigan. And I wanted to spin it into something artistic, but then it turned into this path of being an artist educator up there potentially. And I wanted to move up there. So I spent a month up there volunteering at schools, and also skating in a random ice show and stuff like that, creating a theater company around ice, a fusion of ice and theater. And then from there, with this concrete knowledge, I'm like, okay, I'm going to now subscribe to become a polar educator. But what was funny, what ended up happening was I got into this production. I was doing like two productions in a year, two professional productions. One of them was this theater production called Intimate Apparel in Montreal. And while I was doing this production, I was going to start a seminar during the production, but during the days where I would learn to be a polar educator. And it was like, I've been waiting for this thing for like 6 months. And I was like, this is going to be my big transition, possibly out of acting altogether and into traveling the world and learning about the environment and doing this stuff. Anyway, what came up instead, at the same time, exactly at the same time, and it was like this weird fork in the road where I just went, it's this or that. Which one are you going to choose? You know, red pill, blue pill sort of thing. There was an audition to become a Smurfs puppeteer because Smurfs 2 was shooting in Montreal at the time at Mel Cinema. And I was in a sold out production of this theater show, working every night. It was like a 3-hour production. But I took my day off and I was like, I think I have to audition for this. I have to audition for this piece and I have to like squiggle my way in because I haven't even been invited to the audition. So for some reason, I decided to pursue this really hard. It involved improv and it involved reading for other people's auditions and then finally getting invited in to do, like within a few days, do my own, and then really quickly study Katy Perry sort of pop culture references because she was ultimately Smurfette. And then sort of like improv for like these Hollywood producers in a room. And I got the part. And then what it required was like, it was like this, but it required me dropping the entire polar educator seminar because I couldn't do both at the same time. And there was none to like, and it was also like this really clear sort of like, okay, so you want to act, you're given this opportunity to be in a big Hollywood production for 40 days on set, working as a puppeteer representing the voices of like Smurfette and Vexy and Clumsy opposite Hank Azaria and Brendan Gleeson. And I just like, I couldn't say no, but I also, it was like this really, it had to be this really clear decision of like, you're choosing not to take this other path at all now. Like that's it. This is going to change everything. And I knew it. And so, but I was like, I have no choice now. I'm too far in, go. And it did. It completely, the learning curve was so uncomfortable and so big, but also breathtaking and wild. And thank God I didn't lose my job while I was doing it because I was like double dutying for the first 2 weeks, which they let me do. I almost lost my voice. I probably lost like 10 pounds attempting to like do both of the things at the same time. It was like so much stress. It's probably one of the most stressful times in my life having said yes to it. But then it ended up being like one of the biggest learning curves and it brought me back into acting as a whole.
Yes.
And I kind of didn't look back after that. It was like a clear enough signal that it was giving me is like, okay, no, the acting world wants you in it too, because these things are being offered to you that you can stick with this. And it also showed me a little bit of like comedy and some other things that I might be trying to do within the career that were maybe a little bit less independent. So
interesting. So oh God, where to start? I mean, because you went from polar educator to going down this creative acting route as well. Like, I mean, I'm going to talk about those big forks in the road in a second because sometimes we make those decisions and they're very clear. Sometimes we make decisions like, shall I have toast or not? You know, like what I said earlier. But this one's a big, big one. Did you feel sad? I know you said you didn't look back on it, but was there a sort of tinge of sadness of what could be when you first moved into it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of dissonance in the decision. It was just very clearly one or the other, and I had to go with it. And you can't work on a production like that in that format. Like I was going from not doing improv and not doing that kind of thing to suddenly being thrust into this situation where I was 12 hours or more on set every day and then doing like a full-time production at night and not knowing the language of how to be behind the camera while doing this puppeteering stuff. Like it was petrifying. And also I really, really had been priming myself for about a good year and a half to make this big career decision, switch over to become more of like a social worker. And I quite believed in this work. I can see it being more problematic now as I look back, and I do think I probably made the best decision for a number of reasons. And I've often wondered where that work would come back into my life. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just putting it on hold and it's going to come back into my life later. It hasn't presented itself in the same way ever since. I think it would have been like a drastic life shift, and it probably would have stuck to some degree, and it would have taken me on such a different path. So crazy to think like all these things that have happened now because of the acting. But yeah, when you're like aware that something is going to be really big and shifting for you,
Yes.
of course, there's like a mourning process in the growth, and they go hand in hand. There's always pain. There is like sometimes immense pain in these decisions that that you have to take, and you just don't know what it's gonna be, but you're drawn to it and you have to do it. So yeah, definitely resistance.
You're
For sure.
totally right about the pain. I feel like any sort of major change, of course, the pain of deciding what to eat from day to day is fine, but like it's just calorie counting. That's all right. But like in terms of
Or food intolerances, right?
and food
You know.
intolerances, we can deal with that, I guess. But like, yes, when it comes to those big decisions, life changing decisions, there is a certain amount of pain, but and fear, and also adrenaline, and also a mourning process.
Yeah.
It's so funny that a decision like that, or decisions like this, that can be life enhancing and bring so much joy later on. I wonder why it just feels so difficult when you're shifting your body from point A to point B. Why is it that our bodies, it's almost like we're resisting it? It's like, no, no. Do you want that feeling that I'm trying to convey here?
I love how you have the stars behind you as you're sort of drifting through space asking this question.
I don't know. Just like I'm drifting through the galaxies. But it is that kind of like, there's a pain. I feel you're
Oh
going,
yeah.
because we don't want it, and we're kind of resisting it. Why is it that we want to just be comfortable? I wonder.
I'm sure there's a biological reason, or numerous ones that tell us that predictability is what is good for the body, and that there's safety in it or something. And I think there is a difference between making like drastic decisions that can be very painful, and putting you in certain kinds of distress, versus other kinds of distress that can lead towards you getting towards that thing you really care about. I think those are two very different kinds of pain, but sometimes when you're experiencing them, they feel like the same thing.
Yeah, they do. Oh my
Maybe
God, they
so, does
do.
it?
It doesn't get easy. I mean, I think as we get older, we get used to it, but it doesn't get easy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't find it gets any easier, really.
Are
No.
are you someone though, Patricia, that has always been okay with making the big decisions? Because some people are very good at that. I'm fine with making big decisions even if it feels painful or scary. But are you like that? Are you quite daring, quite adventurous? You don't mind making those decisions?
Yeah, I think that could describe me on some level. And maybe the reason for that is I, there's probably a part of me that's equally afraid, or would find it cognitively dissonant to not make the decisions and go towards the kind of the dream project, or the elation that I feel will come. Maybe I got enough positive affirmation when I was younger from pursuing things with a certain degree of focus, and I think that can definitely affect how one pursues goals later on. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I wonder if big decisions choose me, or if I choose them. Like you sort of you come to them with a certain degree of magnetism, whatever they are.
Do you believe in the universe? Like some people say to me, well, I said recently, I was talking about my passport being at the US Embassy. It was being delayed. I had to cancel some jobs in America recently. My friend messaged me back, and he sent me a voice message saying, maybe it's the universe telling you just have to stay put for a while. You don't know why, but maybe you just have to stay put. And it feels crap that you can't be here. But he was like, it's okay. And I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, I often say it's the universe. It's the universe. Do you sort of believe, not believe, but kind of like, are you open to that? Or do you just go, it is what it is? It's just chance. It's just, that's it.
Maybe a little bit of something in between. I'm somebody who is kind of really anti-astrology and generally anti-religion is telling you how to live your life properly. I say that, but of course I fall into all of the same categories of attempting to like structure my life in a way that's meaningful, and it's kind of all amounting to the same thing. But I don't know. No, I don't say it's the universe. I would use different language for it, but ultimately it's going to be the same thing because I look at space, time, physics. There are zero answers that we have that we can even comprehend about what sort of metaverse we're in or how time is rolling forward.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Like I don't question that I don't understand the big mystery, or also that trusting instincts is good. I think all that stuff, I find my way towards it no matter what, but I'm really reticent to use certain language for it. And maybe that's because I grew up in a hyper religious situation
Ah.
where I found a lot of that was very brainwashing for me, particularly. It works for some people, it can be very bad for other people, cultures, depending on where you live. So, and for me, I grew up in small town Michigan, and we were quite Catholic, and our family sort of moved away from it. But I felt the residue of sticking with a certain kind of God says this and this is what you do. Be a good little girl. Be pure. Be like I fought it. I had to fight out of that. I felt like I had to fight out of that for years afterwards, and it actually has dictated a lot of decisions I've made in life, both logical ones and maybe a little irrational. Not saying that anything's bad, but I don't know. I'm very anti-organized religion in general. Like I'm very wary of it. So, and to me, sometimes certain levels of astrology and things like that kind of bleed into that same kind of format for me. And I'm like, nope, not for me. I need a little more general. But maybe that's, yeah, I don't know. And now I just feel long-winded. I'm like,
It's
religion, astrology, but
No, I mean, I think it's. I talked about this a little bit in the last episode with my guest Rupert Booth, and he's open to everything, but he's essentially logical. Like logic is where he goes in science. But he has always said to me, he's a friend of mine. That he's like, I think both can go hand in hand. You know, they're not mutually exclusive. But he's like, I tend to go down a certain route. I think it's just human beings' way. It's humans' way of trying to give you that mental safety net. We're trying to give ourselves that mental safety net every single time because like life is really difficult and hard, and it can be very harsh. It can also be really wonderful and joyous and amazing. But the human experience is like, if you imagine how many thoughts we have in the day, how many emotions, even tiny ones, if you imagine the ticker on the spectrum, it's going like this all the time. We're feeling hot and cold and angry and sad and everything, and we're not even registering it. It's our brains are working all the time and overtime. So for some people, they do need perhaps to believe in a god, or to go, well, I'm going to consult this oracle or that thing. As long as you're not hurting anyone, I always say do what you need to do, but as long as you're not pushing it on people. I'm kind of interested to know if that there's still residues of that now that you're a fully grown adult. Well, we say we're adults, but it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
oh yeah.
Do you still feel residues of that upbringing, like even now, and you catch yourself going, no, Patricia, no? Like, do you still find that now?
Oh yeah, totally. It's totally in there. I don't think you can ever really like fully. I think when something is very ingrained when you're younger, it's there you can take it in a lot of you can make decisions that take it in very different directions, as this podcast would certainly, I'm sure, affirm. But yeah, I feel the residues of my upbringing all the time, because not all of it is something that I want to try to consciously steer clear of entirely. I think a lot of the ways that I was raised was really awesome, and I was actually raised in a really loving family. And even if I hadn't been, those are all useful bits of information if we can gather them and consciously look at them when we're older and choose to use them as best we can in a positive manner for something else. I don't, yeah. I say I'm not too religious. There are also really great parts of what certain kinds of religious structure can do too. in terms of, I mean, I kind of think it relates to this podcast in that fate versus your own personal decision making. If you put that in a religious structure or sort of a structure of faith, it can take some of that, yeah, as you were saying, decision making out of the process a little bit,
Yes.
and leads you towards kind of more condensed actions, hopefully for generosity, love, good feelings, things that religious values tend to attempt to culture. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. You find incredibly generous people who have decided to adhere to a structure and let go of the other ones. They make that decision and they
Yeah.
make it strongly, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering though, you mentioned earlier about how you were into independent theatre, sort of indie side of life, alternative sort of cultures and alternative things like that. So, do you think that that was the reason why you sought that out, to kind of maybe go, maybe I want to look at something different, something that's a bit more left of centre, something that's a bit more alternative? Do you think that sort of had a bearing on it? And what kind of things were you into then when you were a teenager and when you were younger?
Gosh, you actually brought that back around in a really fun. I was like, yeah, actually, that's exactly why. One of the reasons, that's one of the huge reasons that I did explore more, yeah, subversive material, or trying to shying away from convention, looking directly into to queerness and queer theory at that time. Which yeah, that's not that funny enough. That's almost more conventional now than it used to be, right?
Yes.
Which is great. But of course, then changes the definition of what queer is. It really ultimately.
Of course.
Yeah, I would say my religious upbringing and bucking certain value systems that I learned was then one of the first things, and ultimately one of the most important things I attempted to contend with in my 20s while approaching theater, creative process, society as a whole, what the definition of being a woman was within it. And I was very wary for a while to go back into any sort of, I felt like, and again, maybe misplaced, but I was kind of I fashioned myself as a bit of a rebel and like, yeah, a little bit of a darker artist for a while. And I still use that now because it is very much a part of how I go through any process. And I think probably I've gotten a lot of roles directly based on that exploration and where I was willing to go within my own work and examine in my process and psyche.
I'm exactly the same. That's why I asked. So I kind of tend to float to people, not deliberately. It just seems to be the way it is, who understand alternative culture and look at things a little bit differently. And the darker side of life's always been a very big interest. And when I say that to people, they look at me and they go, "Really? You like that music, or you like this?" I'm like, "Yeah, just because I dress like a 10-year-old from the 80s. But just because I look like this and I'm not going about like kind of gothic or whatever, it doesn't, I just don't dress or whatever convey that in the way that I look, but I certainly feel that inside. But that's the beauty of it. I quite like shocking people sometimes and going, "Oh yeah, I know that. And I've watched that film." And I quite like things that are really messed up. Like I quite like to go there. But I don't know, there's this expectation to wear your interests as your avatar, as on your sleeve almost. And I've never ever been like that. Were you like that when you were younger? Did you kind of dress differently and look differently in accordance to what you were into, I guess? I'm thinking back to when we were in school. I think we were around about the same age. So, for example, rockers looked like rockers. Metalheads look like metalheads. Pop people look like pop people. I don't know, like it was very much like that when I was younger. Were you like that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because it's I feel like you can look at how people are when they're older, and so much of that is determined by how they naturally express themselves in high school. And you probably could look at me and say the same thing, really. I I was a shapeshifter.
Mm.
So I was never, but I was androgynous for a lot of years. As soon as I started, but I wasn't, I wasn't anti-sexual, but I was kind of androgynous,
Yeah.
very much a tomboy, and would shift. I had friends in every group. So I made a point of having friends in every group, and I thought it was ridiculous. I thought preps were absurd. And yet, if you just caught me looking, if you just met me, you'd think I was a prep, probably, because I was captain of the basketball team and an honors student. And but meanwhile, outside of school, I was getting in a lot of, like, I've gotten in some trouble. So
Right.
like it just, and I had I had a quite a tumultuous high school time for a few different reasons, which very much again informed how I decided to become an artist later too.
Right.
And maybe going back and forth in those worlds of being not a prep, but pegged as one, perhaps in certain circumstances, and being able to sit in that world, and then also being able to completely reject it and step outside of it while in high school. It is kind of how I maybe how I am still now, really. Maybe I haven't changed at all in high
I don't
school.
think we do. I mean,
I don't think we,
of course we do,
yeah.
because you're not getting into trouble, I hope. You're not kind of like
No, I've turned quite wholesome in the last couple of years, really. Probably only in the last couple of years.
I feel like I'm leaving my wholesome years behind as I hurtle towards the age of 40. I'm like, and we were like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I'm very much like, I don't care. I kind of didn't care at the start, and then there's this whole middle bit of like really caring, and then I'm like, no, I don't care anymore. But not in a bad way. In a way that I
No.
think, well, it's the whole reason why I started this podcast was because I started it exactly 40 weeks before my 40th. So, but the time this goes out, I'll be well under 40 weeks till my 40th. Crap.
Oh, I love it.
But it was a way, because it was a year of change. This is a year of change, and last year was a year of change, and so that's why the podcast is about this. It's made me realize that I don't think I've changed. I was still 18-year-old Claire in a way. Like, I still
Yeah.
feel like that. So even though my life has changed, I'm a responsible adult. I pay the bills, I pay the rent. I can do this. I've got my job. There's like sometimes I just do. I revert back. For you, do you feel quite the same? I mean, you're saying maybe I've not changed. How have you not changed? And how are you still the same? Maybe the same but better, slightly better, like an improved version of yourself.
Yeah. Maybe better, maybe a bit better in some ways, and maybe not in others.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means anymore. I'm actually, I feel like getting sort of halfway through my life, like having lived this long, like getting to where I am now and being able to just kind of feel pleasure, and not be stuck in an anxiety loop.
Yes.
Like just be able to do those basic things, and more, like find certain moments in a day when I feel like I'm thriving, be able to sort of spend time and find like little bits of community, good long-term friends, romantic connections, all these things. Like the fact that I can do any of that right now and I have my health, I'm just like, oh, wow. So maybe it's better in that I just appreciate what I've lived already, and I couldn't have known what that was going to be at that age.
Yes.
At 18, yeah. Do you know what you're gonna? I bet our core personalities are very much the same. So then, like, well, what does that mean for you then? This question that you ask of like, because if you ask somebody what is a decision that then kind of changed their life, and then you ask somebody to ask this question, maybe a fork in the road thing, or like you woke up one day and you ate bread and then this happened to you. Well, anyway, big philosophical question, like nature, nurture, fate, destiny. But if you really don't change much from when you're in high school, then who cares what the decision?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I've always, I do get scared about things. I still get scared if I step on a stage. I mean, it's more like that's the adrenaline stuff. You know what it's like when you're about to do a new job, or like, you still feel, but you're cool. I just know I'm capable, but I'm nervous. I still feel nervous. I still get scared about decisions. I'm about to make a few very big ones this year again, but I've always been someone, even when I was 18, I was okay with making them. I moved to Germany for 6 months. And I was like, cool, don't care. I was scared and I got myself into a lot of trouble. But that's being 18. I look back and I thought the world was ending and I was like, no, I was 18. That's all it was. And then I came back and then I decided to move to London. I was like, okay, I'll just move to London. Why not? And then that changed everything again. And I'm sort of quite used, and the way I was brought up, our household was always quite tumultuous, and it was never settled. So I never felt like my life was settled anyway, emotionally anyway. So it very much felt like change is inevitable, and feeling uncomfortable is normal. that sounds kind of fucked up, but it's like it's true.
Well, it is and it isn't, right?
Yeah.
I wonder. I mean, I don't know, what was I listening to? It's like that podcast Hidden Brain.
I've heard of Hidden Brain.
Yeah, Shankar Vedante. Oh my gosh, so I love that podcast so much. There was an episode recently. He was talking about distress. Actually, I was sort of quoting it a little bit earlier because I really, really liked this one. I was like, oh, it's so beautiful the way they're talking about discomfort and people with higher degrees of success being able to withstand larger levels of discomfort in a world that feeds us so much comfort all the time. And we become weaker because we expect comfort and we expect to feel comfortable, and we don't want to feel distress.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is for each person, like what is the threshold to where it becomes unhealthy? Like I think in the podcast so they're like, don't stick your hand in the toaster when you're toasting your Pop-Tart. Don't stay in an abusive relationship. Don't tell somebody, well, they can withstand this. But how do you really know? I think for like most of your life you're just trying things.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of fascinating to be okay. Sorry, this is gonna bring me back to a question you asked earlier. Do I think I'm better now than I was when I'm 18?
Sure.
Yes, in that I'm probably more strategic about what I'm able to choose. And I can see a certain merit behind choosing very simple things, stepping back from others. And there's a certain humility that comes with age that's astoundingly important. Yes. And hopefully a generosity too. And the fact that I feel that I can still be outward moving or giving.
Yes.
A little bit humble, and again, like feel simple pleasures at this age after having like done all that weird exploration where you don't know what's going to happen from these decisions is pretty great. I don't expect it's going to get easier, but I do think life is pretty damn awesome right now. So I'm kind of just
no, you're right. I think that's a really lovely way to think of it. I've been saying recently to a lot of people, I'm trying not to live in a lack mentality where, you go, I wish I had this, I wish he liked me, or I wish I had that job, or why did they do this, or why have they got this, and why can't I pay the rent? All of these things are lack mentality sort of ways of thinking, and the way that I've bracketed it in my mind. And so what I've been trying to do recently is go, no, like, look at the friends I've got. Look how far I've come. Like, look at all the nice people I've met. Like, like yourself, getting to interview you last year. And I was thinking about that before you came on. I was like, isn't it just so nice? We went in August and now we're sitting here, and I'll probably meet you again, and life will put us together. Not all the time, but it might, shove us together again. And then we may not see each other. So I thought that's nice. It's nice. These are really,
it's nice.
It's lovely. It's okay to not be outstanding. Sometimes it doesn't have to be, oh my God, joyous. It's really lovely. It's just lovely.
Yeah.
And I think living in that when I was in my 20s, I was like, I want this. Why can't I have that? Because you're this impetuous 20-something that's like, I just want to make my mark in the world, and I just want to go out and do my thing. And now I'm way more, I think, there's a humility and there's a way more chilled sort of way to be. Even though inside I'm not chilled, But I'm like, outwardly, I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to always step up or do the thing. I'm just a bit more like, yeah, it's fine. I think that's much
Yeah.
nicer. It's way less stressful, Patricia, being older. I'll say that. Not all the time,
Well,
but
it kind of is, yeah, because you're like able to step back and examine your decisions a little more, and you
yes.
realize like the next thing isn't going to like break you in a moment. I mean, maybe there are things that will, but in general, the stuff that makes you go "Wah, wah, wah, wah,"
Yeah.
is like a little bit less extreme, and so you can kind of recognize it at least a little bit. And oh my God, yeah. In my 20s, everything was like, it was like go big or go home. I felt like I had to like live my entire life every day and just make big, bold decisions all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's part of the process of getting older. And sometimes it's really good to have that kind of fuel in you because it does lead to really fascinating things if well directed. If
Yes.
well, you know, if you don't like put it like directly into like hard drugs and you know whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of glad to also be out of that stage now
Yes.
and having to be more strategic because you're just like, no, man, I just want to relax and like, wow, look at this coffee. This coffee's great. Look at
Yeah.
that tree, that bird. It's so good.
Look at
I
that
get to take a
tree.
plane.
I'm
Wow.
just imagining you sitting at home, just like looking at trees and place. Do you know what, Patricia? I do miss about my 20s is my metabolism. I really miss that. R.I.P. metabolism. Oh, you and plants. Are you a plant
I'm sorry.
person?
Yeah, I just look at plants sometimes. Like this is a peace
Okay.
lily,
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
it just like it keeps on blooming these great little flowers that look totally yoni or phallic or however you want to say it. Anyway, it's so funny. And then they shrivel up and they fall off like every week. Every week it creates new flowers and it just grows and then it's really dramatic. Um,
So,
and it takes about 5 days and the whole thing will be like, I'm so dehydrated. I can't live anymore. And then you put water in it. And then within a day, it's like, you know, like this big dramatic flower again. It's crazy. So I let my plants do the drama, whereas that used to be me, and now I let my peace lily be the drama
I like
queen
how
in my head.
you're just like watching it with like a cup of coffee, going, yeah, all right, okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
like,
a,
oh, chill out. Yeah,
I'm like that with my cat. My cat goes mad. I'm like, yes, yes, okay, cool. Because there is something to be said for stepping back. I mean, like even with, I mean, if we go back to that decision that you made about, you know, going and taking that job and then going down the creative route, would you say now where you are in your career looking back and you've still got a long way to go, you've still got so many, there's jobs to book, there's adventures still to be had, you know, we're not dead yet, but it's looking back at that, like what have you learned from this timeline that you're going to take forward with you in the future?
to trust time, to trust time, actually, that it takes about 3 times as long to execute anything than I think it's going to, but also that it's worth it. But the way you can know it's worth it is by the way that it keeps nagging at you or pulling your curiosity. It's actually really very simple. It's hard to actually put into execution, but knowing kind of what pleases you and what you're moving towards when you feel pleasure is like just the most important simple thing. And I think I didn't trust it as much as I do now. Um, but it's just like you have to be patient and sit in things to understand where it's supposed to guide you a little bit. And if that
That's
doesn't sound religious, I don't know what does, but it's all, or if that doesn't sound starry.
no, I no,
So,
I'm this, and there's nothing wrong with sounding a bit like that sometimes because it's just
no,
coming from you, you know, and that's it's your truth, and it's your truth, Patricia.
it's my peace, Lily.
It's my piece,
Offering him.
Lily, and it's what you've learned, you know, over these years. I'm still learning patience. Um, I am the world's most impatient person, and that's something I've carried with me since I was very, very young. I want everything yesterday, like, and outwardly doesn't look like that, but my god, my friends must hate me. The voice messages I send them going, "Oh my god, oh my god," like, oh, I'm trying, Patricia. I'm trying very hard, but it's not easy to change the habit of a lifetime. It's really not easy. Um, Patricia, You have been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation because I've got to learn a lot more about you. When we see each other again, hopefully at some point soon, I really want to find out more about like alternative lifestyle, Patricia, and all of the things that you were into when you were in your 20s and stuff. I feel like we've just scraped the surface, but where can people find you, Patricia? And is there anything you want to promote particularly at the moment?
Ooh, ooh. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the socials. I'm getting back on there a little more now. So that's at Summersett underscore on Instagram and Twitter. I do have a Facebook, Patricia Summersett. They're verified, so just look for the verifications there, the little blue thing, and I am there and I do check in. And the only thing that I would like to promote right now, because the rest of the stuff I cannot really talk about,
Sure.
got a couple things coming out this year that are fun. But I'm also releasing an album with my band, and we've just put the order in for the vinyls. It's all mastered now as of January, and so we're thinking like a May release, and going to be popping out with information on that soon. So the band is a hard thing, but it's really, really fun. And it's this wonderful group of 8 musicians out of Montreal. And it's indie folk, or it's like, I guess, alternative folk or art folk, as we call it. And hopefully somebody will love one of the songs on it and put it on their playlist.
Oh my God, Patricia, I cannot wait to hear that. I can't wait to hear it. That sounds really cool. Guys, please
Thank
go
you.
follow Patricia. When this podcast goes out, you'll know where to find her because we'll have all of the details on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, if you're on Spotify, just get a pen and paper. I don't know, like get your phones out, write it down. Patricia, you've been wonderful. Thank you very, very much for joining me.
My pleasure, Claire.
Thank you very much to everyone listening along on Spotify and watching along on YouTube. This has been Hot Pod Time Machine. I'm Claire. This is Patricia, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.
Take care.
Hot Pod Time Machine.